Direction+, the first line of defence.
What's up guys, Jeremy from Direction+ again, and today we're doing another install video. Today we're installing it on a Isuzu MUX, and we're installing our ProVent and Pre-Line combo kit on this particular vehicle. So stay tuned and I hope you enjoy. Right guys, so we're going to start with, before we put anything else in the car, we're going to start with installing the wiring harness or the alarm harness for the Pre-Line kit. The only reason why doing this part first makes sense is once you've installed all the brackets and stuff, sometimes it's a little bit hard to try and get this harness through the firewall. So this is the only part that you need to stick through the firewall. So you just need to find a location in the firewall, a grommet, where you can poke that through, and we'll get that done and then we'll get on to the rest of the kit. Rightio, so just a little hint. To help you put the harness through the firewall, sometimes it's nice to use a piece of plastic. In this case I'm using a zip tie, and all you need to do is just tape the zip tie to the harness. It just gives you something a little bit stiffer to poke through the hole that you have made in the firewall. Now that we've installed the harness for the water sensor, we'll now go put in the bracket. So this here being the bracket for the kit, it mounts in the vehicle like such. There is a pressed steel bracket here which mounts two fuel lines, so you need to undo the M10 head bolt that is there, and there is also two pre-existing threaded holes where the front of the bracket locates. So we'll put this in now. So we just reinstall the bolt that we took out of the pressed steel bracket and reuse that one. So just leave that one loose until you put in the other two bolts. So spring washer, flat washer, and your bolt. So once you've got the bolts in place, just locate the bracket, make sure that it's not rubbing on anything, and secure all the bolts. Rightio, once with the bracket secured, there is two more brackets that go on this one. There's a brace which goes across here and also a brace which goes to the inner guard. Now we will mount the ProVent and the Pre-Line kits in place and we'll go from there. So with the supplied fuel line, just to make things a little bit easier, if you get the fuel line and cut it in half, that'll just give you two easier lengths of hose to work with. So 12mm hose clamp, just stick it on the end of the hose and connect the supplied 12mm fuel line to the hard line that comes from the fuel tank. So once the hose is secure, just neatly tuck it up out of the way. Make sure that you don't get any dirt and stuff, and that you remember that this one is actually the outlet from the fuel tank. The other bit of hose that you have, connect that to the inlet of the factory fuel filter, and once again gently run it around behind the bracket, and make sure that you understand or remember which one was the inlet and which one was the outlet. Okay, reinstall the factory fuel filter. Like such, and don't forget to reinstall the sensors. So for those that don't know, this bottom wire here is for the factory water sensor, and this top sensor here is actually a pressure switch, and that will let you know if the fuel filter ever becomes blocked. Okay, so with the Pre-Line, you will need to remove the port, the plug that is in this port over to this side here. It doesn't come in the correct spot out of the box, so you just need to undo that and plug it into there again. Okay, so now with our port swapped over, you get your two M10 bolts, 4 flat washers and 2 nuts, and we will mount our Pre-Line. Rightio, so down here there's a little bracket. Sometimes, depending on the vehicle, that the water sensor will actually sit on top of that bracket. So depending on the vehicle, you just may need to slightly bend that bracket out of the way so it doesn't foul on the water sensor. Make sure that you plug in the water sensor into the bottom. And that the water sensor is secure. So with the Pre-Line in place, you can then insert the two M16 flat washers and your M16 adapters. Now with these particular threads, you don't require to use any thread sealant. Just make sure that when you do them up that they are snug. These washers here are soft and they deform a little bit and create the seal. When tightening these up, try and use a ring spanner just so you don't mar the fittings at all. Rightio, so now with the pre-line in place, we will attach our fuel lines. These are the barbs or the adapters that we supply in the kit for it. Couple of things to keep in mind: these don't actually need hose clamps because of the low pressure in these particular ones. These barbs are designed to lock onto the hose and not let go. If you wish to put hose clamps on them, by all means go right ahead, but it's not necessary. Another little hint is just lubricate with WD-40, rubber grease or diesel, just to give it a little lubricity when you're plugging these in. Just makes life a little bit easier. So we'll trim the hoses to length. Make sure that the bend radiuses aren't too tight and you're not kinking the hose. And don't chop your fingers off. So once the hose is cut to length, just with the barb, push it into the hose. Okay, so these are the fittings that we supply in the kit. Make sure that you lube these up. It just makes life a little bit easier when you're installing these fittings. A little bit on the inside of the hose. So make sure that the hose is pushed all the way in behind this little collar here, just to ensure that the hose is engaged in both the barbs. Same with the other hose as well. Just cut it to length. A little bit of lubricant to the inside of the hose. And insert the fitting. Once again, just making sure that the hose actually goes into this little cowling right here and connect it up to the pre-line. Now, these don't need to be done up super tight, but they do need to be snug. Okay, so now we'll install the ProVent. Now I've pre-installed the drain hose, just so it makes it easier, not trying to put this drain hose on whilst it's mounted in the vehicle. I've also pre-installed the 25 to 16 millimeter couplers, and now we'll mount this. Out of the box, the mounting bracket may not be located in the correct spot, so you just need to unclip that at the back and rotate it around into the correct position for the installation, like so. Now run the hose down on the inner guard and we'll locate and we'll install the drain at a later point. Now using your M8 bolts, we will mount the ProVent in place. Now it is quite tight in here. If the Pre-Line fouls on the ProVent case, you just may need to loosen these and push it across a little bit. Okay, now with the ProVent and the Pre-Line both mounted in place, you may wish to install the brace, which boxes the bracket in like so, and just adds to a little bit of rigidity and structure to the bracket. Just loosely put the nuts and bolts in place and then tighten them up once everything's in position. Now that that brace is in place, we're going to install the other brace, and that goes between these two mounting points here and the bolt that secures the top of the washer neck. Rightio, now with all the support brackets in place, we're going to run the hoses for the ProVent. First we will take off the engine cover, so then we can locate the inlet and outlet of the engine to run the connector ProVent hoses to. So the connection for the crankcase, so right here we have the outlet for the crankcase ventilation system, and just down here running back into the intake system is where it returns back into the engine. So we're going to disconnect this hose, remove it, and then we will reconnect the ProVent up to the system again. Okay, so I've pre-assembled our two hoses. This particular one here will be going from the rocker cover to the ProVent, to the inlet of the ProVent. This hose here will be going from the ProVent after the oil has been removed and return back to the intake of the engine. So we'll remove the factory bypass hose. Like so. So once again, if you ever wish to return your car back to stock, make sure that you hang on to this hose and keep it in a safe place. Depending on how you are, it may be easier if you take the turbo pressure pipe off. Just remember, when you remove this, make sure you stick some rags in there to ensure that nothing goes into the turbo or the intercooler. Now just a note, this install is a little bit different to what's in the instructions. There is an appendix in the instruction, and it's for vehicles that are fitted with a DPF. And the easiest way to tell if it's a DPF is it has an orange hose coming out of the turbo like this. So as you can see inside the turbo hose, the oil, so this is the oil that the ProVent removes. This oil gets on the inside of your intercooler, reduces the efficiency of your intercooler, and also this is what the soot sticks to from the EGR system and causes that engine cholesterol in your inlet manifolds. So right now we will install the clean side of the ProVent. So we'll attach this one to the bottom outlet of the ProVent, back into the inlet of the engine air intake system. That's the clean side installed, so from the ProVent outlet to the air intake. Rightio, so now we're going to install this hose, which is the hose that goes from the crankcase back into the ProVent. for the oil to be removed. So once you have the two hoses installed, we'll put the charge air hose back on, and then using the zip ties that we have, we'll secure the two ProVent hose. Just be sure that there is no unnecessary tension on the reducing barbs on the ProVent so they don't split. Once you've put the two hoses on, zip tie the hoses up to stop them from rubbing on each other and anything else, and reconnected any hoses that you may have disconnected when routing the hoses. And we throw the engine cover back on. Like such. So now that the engine cover's back on, the hoses all zip tied up, we've put the high pressure hose back on. We're now just going to prime the fuel system and get the fuel back through the factory fuel system. To do that, there's a couple of different ways. You can take the outlet of the factory fuel system off and then pump the fuel through, or what you can do is you pump the factory primer just here until it goes firm, crank the engine over. If the engine happens to stop, prime the system again using the primer, and then crank the engine again. So once you have the fuel system primed, make sure you let the engine run for 15 to 20 minutes just to ensure that there's no air pockets left in the engine. So now, after you've finished installing the ProVent, we're going to install the drain and secure the drain hose. To make life a little bit easier for you, you can turn the wheel to one lock, and just so you can get in behind the wheel without having to try and jack the car up and take the wheel off. Now we're going to go ahead and install the drain. Okay, so that is the drain mounted. Just when you mount the drain, make sure that it's easy to get access to and that it's not going to foul on any of the suspension components, the inside of the wheel or any of the control arms. Okay, so now we have the ProVent in, we have the Pre-Line in, we have them all hooked up and the drains hooked up. So now what we have to do now is we will start running the wiring and hook up the alarm system for the Pre-Line. Here we have the line that we ran through the firewall before. It's nice and easy, you don't actually have to take out the glove box. You can get up underneath there without too much drama at all. So now that we have this ran through the firewall, we need to run it behind the dash over to the driver's side of the vehicle. Okay, so in our Pre-Line kit, we have the water sensor control unit. So this is a 5-stage alarm system, which goes from just letting you know that there is water present in the bottom of the Pre-Line to annoying the hell out of you. So the reason why we've done it that way is so that it isn't an immediate distraction to the driver, but it just allows the driver to know that there is water there and that they need to drain it. Once the water has been drained out of the bottom of the Pre-Line, the unit will automatically reset. Also, we have the decal to let you know what the warning light is for. Now this is optional. If you don't have any blinking plugs in your vehicle, you don't have to install this, but it's there if you want it. We have our warning light. We have 4 adder circuits of various types. So this just depends on whatever kind of fuses you have inside your vehicle, and you select whichever one that you require. And then we have the power harness for the control unit. So it's nice and easy. There's 3 plugs in the side of it. You have your indicator light, water sensor, and power. So once you've located the fuse panel for the vehicle, in this case on the MUX, that it's on the driver's side, right hand side of the steering wheel, you can either piggyback off an existing fuse, or if in this particular case there are blank fuse holders which have power supply to them that you can use and draw power from. Okay, now with the power wire crimped, we just need to pick up a pre-existing earth point. There should be generally, there's the dashboard support panel which runs behind the dash. There's normally like M10 bolts which you can pick up to, but this just gets screwed to the body of the vehicle and earths out the circuit. We have the earth connected and we have the power connected. So just before you get too carried away and you zip tie it up and then you realize that it doesn't work, you can just plug in the power harness like that. Once you've made your 2 connections, turn the connection on, turn the ignition on, and then you should hear that tone. I'll do it again once more time. And that tone there, that's just a diagnostic tone just to let you know that everything is working. Okay, so once you have everything hooked up, this particular installation we aren't going to install the warning buzzer. I will let the customer decide where they want. There is actually a blanking plug right there which they can install it into if they want, but I'll leave that up to the customer to decide. So bundle up all the excess harness. If you wish, you can solder these if you want. However, just for the ease of installation, you can just bundle them up like that and it will be fine. And then you zip tie, find a location up behind the dash, make sure that you have plenty of free wire, and then you can just zip tie that up underneath that dash. So just so you can see, that's the alarm system installed and zip tied up out of the way. Okay, so that is the installation done. So we've installed the Preline-Plus with the water alarm. In this particular instance, we haven't put in the visual indicator for the customer. We'll leave that up to them. And we've also installed the ProVent air oil separator. I hope you enjoyed the install. As always, if you have any questions, drop us a line on Facebook or info@directionplus.com.
Direction Plus, the first line of defence.